that 7% cut, in my opinion, would be adequate to deal with any shortfall in revenue at current oil prices. That's about $3-4 billion in reduction in expenditure, and that should be adequate at this time. But you have to also understand the price is an average price for the year. For the first 3 quarters, the average was just over about $40.60. Obviously, for this month, the average is below that. So for the first 6 months, you might come up with an average of maybe $35. So it's not the price you're seeing today. If you look at now, you might see $28 or $29 is today's price. But that's not the average price, because the revenue is based on an average price of $45 from October 1 to September 30th. So we keep reviewing it all the time.
And then what impact already indicating that there could be an adjustment in the price of oil and gas for the budget to reflect what is happening in the international markets. What impact that could have, let's say, for the third and fourth quarters of the government's financial year in the context of expenditure? We would have cuts that we did not expect when we deliver the budget in September.
No, the point I just made, let's say you get an average of $30 for the year, based on what happened in the first quarter, and then what you expect would happen in the third and fourth quarters, and what happened in the second quarter. You might average out at 30 or 35, whatever the number is. The current reduction in expenditure should manage that sort of price structure. It's only if oil goes to $10 or $15 or whatever it is, then you'll have to make further adjustments. One of the good things is that we didn't budget much for revenue from oil anyway, because the oil companies are doing a lot of investment in exploration and drilling and so on, and they're allowed, under some fiscal incentives that were put in place, tax concessions were put in place in 2014, they are now allowed to write off their capital expenditure much faster than they could before. Previously, an oil company might need to write off capital expenditure over a 3 to 4 year period. Now they can write it off in 1 to 2 years. So BP, for example, has said they're going to spend over $1.5 billion in capital expenditure in this year, 2016. And when you take that amount of capital expenditure and you put it against revenue, we weren't expecting to get any huge amount of money from BP. We were holding talks with them, and we're looking for ways and means, because we're not comfortable, so we want as much tax revenue as we can get out of them. But in doing the national budget, I did not budget for a large sum of money from the oil companies. For 2 reasons: because the price of oil was depressed, and also because I knew all of these companies are doing significant capital works in 2016, which would write off against their tax liability, and therefore the tax liability would be much less than it would have been 3 or 4 years ago. Okay?
Sir, a couple of different areas. Some people,
excuse me, where are you from?
Sasha Harinam from Newsday.
Newsday.
I'm asking, I noticed that PRIX is one of the items that will no longer be zero-rated.
Yes.
A lot of people in this country consider the value of basic food item. Why put PRIX back on the list?
On the list of what?
It's no longer going to be zero-rated according to this slide.
All right. Now, there's a basic misconception that the value-added tax system should be an instrument of social policy. It is not. It is simply a tax collection measure. And when it was introduced by the NER in 1989 or 1990, whenever they introduced it, they had a very small and tight list of exempt items. We're trying to go back to that. We're trying to make that as efficient as possible. As I said in Parliament the other day, an argument can be made for anything. I was asked to consider exempting Morbi from that because it's a favorite, drink. I was asked to exempt PRIX because it's a cultural thing. So you can make an argument for anything. I've been asked to look at books because, it's educational. I've been asked to look at computers. A compelling and strong argument can be made from a social perspective to exempt VAT from virtually any product. But that's not the purpose of the VAT system. The VAT system is simply there to collect revenue, and it's supposed to be a strong and robust revenue collection mechanism because it has to counterbalance the general lowering of income tax rates and the increases in personal allowance over the years. We used to have tax rates in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, I remember when I first was employed. Yes, mine. I remember when I was first employed. I was in the 70% bracket. Though, you know, we used to have sliding scales of tax in those days. As you earn more, you know, your tax goes up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and so on. Well, that has long gone out the window. But the tax then went down to 40%, 35%. And it was in 2006, under the former PNM administration, Mr. Manning was Prime Minister, that we had a uniform tax rate of 25%, very low tax rate compared to many other countries in the world. And then the personal allowance was increased from $24,000, $2,000 a month, to $60,000, $5,000 a month. So you had this significant drop in the rate of income tax and a significant increase in the personal allowance. So whenever you're in a country and a government, you're doing that. You're lowering personal income tax, corporation tax, and so on, increasing allowances so that the actual disposable income of the individual after tax is much higher. You're going to lose revenue. So you have to counterbalance that with a consumption tax or a sale tax and make it as strong and robust as possible. So the purpose of VAT, as I said, is not for social engineering. It's simply to collect revenue to counteract for the loss of revenue from the lowering of income tax rates. Look at what we've done. We've increased the personal allowance again, yet again. That's putting more disposable income in the hands of taxpayers. So we have to keep that VAT system tight. And our policy is to take the money that we earn from taxation and target it to underprivileged groups or people in need. So we feel it's a much more efficient way of doing things. Try and have as few exemptions as possible. Try and earn as much tax revenue as you can and use that to pay for your social programs. You have to understand as well, a lot of people don't pay income tax at all. People don't pay corporation tax. They're always declaring a loss. They don't declare the income. So a consumption tax like value-added tax, again, is a way of gathering tax from people who avoid tax elsewhere in the corporate sector and so on. So our policy is to have as few exemptions as possible and to make the value-added tax system as robust and strong as possible and take the revenue collected from that and use it to support our social programs. Okay?
So, a month ago when I was here, I asked Mr. Coffey if government was considering reducing salaries of MPs and ministers to help with the budget shortfall. He said he would take it back to Cabinet for consideration. Has this been discussed at Cabinet? Is it being considered to help meet the budget shortfall?
Well, we effectively have a 5% cut in our salaries. Are you not aware?
Well, that is more towards the charities of the ministers.
It's still a cut.
Well,
it is. I'm losing 5% of my salary this month. That's a fact. And it's going to NGOs, sporting organizations, and charities who would otherwise come to the government for assistance. So we are cutting our salaries and we are giving it to these charitable organizations, thereby reducing their demand on the Treasury.
Is a system being put in place to make sure that these charities don't approach various ministers who may not be communicating and then getting multiple?
Well, no, there are no restrictions on it. It would have become too cumbersome. It just has to be properly registered organization that's reputable. And, so you more or less can be assured the money will go to the purpose intended. And it will be different from month to month and from minister to minister. We're not putting any